We are talking about this series about growing up, and it's kind of cute, I think, like when your 8-year-old nephew comes to you and he's like, "Hey, Uncle Chris," and he's got the toy gun and the badge, and he's just playing cop. But imagine if you had like this guy in your neighborhood, a 30-year-old man walking around with toy badges and guns and writing tickets on napkins and leaving them on your windshield. At some point, that just kind of gets annoying, and when we watch adults kind of behave like kids, at some point it's like haha funny, and then at some point it's like okay, that's enough. It's time to grow up. And we've been talking about this process about growing up. There's this process, and just not just physically but spiritually, there's this process that God is taking us through, and that's kind of one of our cultural values here at PAC. We have this value that says process is greater than product, and we're saying it's not just about getting to the ending. It's not just about having a great product, it's about how you get there, because in the process is where the growth and where the maturity happens. And so we are putting a large emphasis on how we grow up. For a lot of you know, I used to do magic. I was a magician for a while, and I remember getting this gig at, I was doing bar mitzvahs in Winnipeg. I was at a Jewish cultural center, and I was doing magic, and I thought this was great because, you know what, I love magic and I love kids, so this was going to be a lot of fun, and I guess I didn't see something coming, because there's this thing about a coming-of-age ceremony for a boy where he's 13, and now he's becoming a man, and something inside, some kind of entitlement inside starts to rise up. So I remember doing my shows, and it pretty much never failed. At some point, the boy, bar mitzvah, I'm doing my show, and I could just see this moment. He's like, "I can do whatever I want." And I was like, oh no. And sure enough, he would come up into my show, and he'd be like, "No, you're not, nope." And he'd go into my bag, and he'd pull out the hat, and he'd be like, "See, there's a hole in the hat, everybody, and that's how he gets the rabbit in the hat." And I'd be like, oh man, this thing is, and it just wasn't, as soon as he did it, it became this infection. And it just spread. And then I had all the kids running through my stuff. And I'm always this close away before I just kind of enter into choke slam mode, where I'm just picking kids up and being like, "Ooh, ooh." Parents know what I'm talking about. What's the problem there? The problem is that maturity isn't a moment. It's not just it just doesn't just happen like that. And so without valuing the process, there can be this entitlement thing that rises up in us, and things can get kind of ugly. God is really trying to put lots of blessing in our life and grow maturity, but if we haven't gone through that process, we don't have the character, we don't have the depth to sustain what He wants to have in store for us. So today, we're talking about entitlement, and we're saying that obligation is better than entitlement. Obligation is better than entitlement. Now, obligation isn't necessarily maybe the right word. I think there's probably a better word, because obligation seems to imply that you're working for something or someone, and God's not really your boss. I think that's an inaccurate view of who God really is. And so I think we need a better word. Maybe by the end of this, we'll kind of flesh something out and we'll have something better. Because I think we all know what it's like when we've had a bad boss. We've all worked for a bad boss, right? I know I have too, right? And here's the worst type of boss. Here's the worst type of boss. The worst type of boss. Not Nathan. Nathan's a good boss, I'll be honest. But the worst type of boss is the boss who always reminds you that he's the boss. How much fun is that? Everything you do, he's reminding you, "I'm the boss and you're not." That's not a lot of fun. I was that boss, actually. I remember being that boss. I was 26 years old. I just finished 5 years of Bible college. I started working in the school division. And then shortly after, in the summers, I started working at this golf course. And I was working there for a while. And then we had these millionaires come in, and they had a bunch of golf courses in Ontario, and they're going to buy this golf course, and they're going to change things up, shake it up. So they do that. They let a bunch of people go, and in that, this 26-year-old guy gets promoted. Me, I get promoted. I've got 60 people under me, and I have a little bit of restaurant experience. I grew up in the restaurant, but this was kind of over here, above me. But there's something inside of me in that moment, this little, oh yeah, 26, that's right. These millionaires, see, this guy, that's right. They see how good I is. In that little bit, it just kind of started to grow a bit. I remember my bosses coming up to me at one point, and they're like, okay, Chris, you have power, but you lack authority. And so, like, people around you should just know that you're the boss. But what I heard is, I need to make sure everybody knows I'm the boss. I need to tell people. I need to tell people they're the boss, that I'm the boss, and everything I do. So I remember it would just get crazy. I remember like, hey, bring those carts around. And the guy would be like, what? Why? I'd be like, oh, you want to know why? Yeah, sure, come over here. I'll tell you why. You know what? I'm not going to tell you why. You know why? Because I'm the boss. Now do it. And it just continued. It like snowballed. I remember one time like this guy eating a donut, and I'd make an example of this person. I'm like, throw that donut in the garbage. You know what? No, don't throw it here. Bring it here. Bring it here. I'm going to eat the donut in front of you. Teach you a donut lesson about donuts. And I'm the boss. And you're not. And everything I did was just really like making sure people know that like they're here and I'm here. I think I even made like every week I probably made a girl cry. I pretty much did that. I think I made a grandma cry. You can hate on me a little bit for that one. But it got ugly, and it didn't just stay in my job, that entitled spirit. That just didn't stay there. It actually carried into my relationships. I remember my best friend since junior high, and I had this job, and he's like, hey, I'm selling my house. And I'm like, sweet, that's so awesome, because my wife's a real estate agent, so that you can list with her, we can share the spoils. Woo, awesome. He's like, no, actually, I was just going to list privately, and I can save a ton of money. I was like, oh, no. And then I just kind of lost it on him. And I remember just kind of blasting him. And then I even did so much as to separate myself from him for this period of time. I'm not talking to you. This is what friends do. Like, I'm entitled. I felt like I was entitled to his stuff. And so then I'm kind of over here. And you know how when you feel like you're so right, what do? We always go make like a new group of friends, right? They're never really the people you really want to hang out with in the first place, but they think you're right, and they're like, oh, Chris, you're so right. So I'm hanging out with these other people, and I got my friend over here going like, what happened? But it actually took some really good friends of mine to come up to me and say, Chris, you're acting crazy. And so he still talks to me today. And that's really what entitlement does. It can really set us into this delusion. It can get us into this place where we kind of start behaving like adolescents. And Nathan talked a couple weeks ago about what adolescents look like, and you can kind of see them all in my story. First of all, adolescents look like, we feel superior. They definitely had that going on. We basically dissociate from true communities. We kind of leave our good friends, our real people, and we go and we kind of make these pseudo communities, kind of like what I like to call the yes club, where everybody just agrees with you. And you make assumptions based on, your position, right? Because I just assume because I'm friends that he should just do this. And then you always think you're so right. You have this myth of right about you, but you're actually really lost. And one day, Jesus has a bunch of people in front of him. He had a bunch of Chris's around him, a group of Chris's. And basically, he sees something going on in them. Basically, this group of people were called the Pharisees, and they were teachers of the religious law. And they saw Jesus not behaving the way they thought he should behave as a teacher. They saw him hanging out with sinners, with people who were prostitutes, people who had stolen money, who lie, thieves, and tax collectors. And they said, oh no, you're not doing it right. We know what's right. And Jesus kind of sees this group of people, and he kind of probably is going in his mind, he's probably going, oh, okay, I see what's going on. You guys actually don't think these people are your brothers and sisters. Or he's saying, oh, okay, I know what's going on. You actually think you're better than these people. Oh, okay, I get it. Let me tell you a story. Or he's probably thinking, oh, you guys think you're so right, but you're actually lost. Let me tell you a story. So Jesus tells them a story, and it's a story you've heard before. It's the story of the prodigal son. And the story goes like this. A man had two sons, and the younger son comes to his father, and he says, "Give me my share of the estate now." And this would have been fairly shocking to the listener. To come and ask for the father's things before he's dead would have been like wishing him dead. So this is actually the first type of entitlement, and it is entitlement that is it's when you're making demands without process, without a process. It's basically saying, I deserve this stuff without doing anything. And culturally, I think we can see that here in our culture, but also at this culture, this younger son actually had a responsibility. He actually had a responsibility to come and support his older son, who had the larger share of the estate and was supposed to carry on the family name, and he just says, no, I don't want to do that. Just give me my stuff now. The listeners are appalled with this younger son. And so the father agrees to divide his wealth between his two sons, which would have been equally shocking to the listener, because the only appropriate response for a father in Middle Eastern times, ancient Middle Eastern times, would have been for him to drive his son out of the house physically. And so they are looking at this father and they're saying, he's not behaving right. So the father divides this stuff up. And the son takes his stuff and he basically leaves. He leaves to like this distant land. He leaves his community. And there he wastes all his money in wild living. And this text was originally written in Greek. That word for wild living in Greek is korona. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about. So now, there you go. Now you know some Greek and you get the point at the same time. And about this time, his money runs out. It's also when his coronas runs out. And this great famine hits the land. And he doesn't have enough food, and he basically begins to starve, and he persuades this local farmer to take him on to help with the pigs. And at some point, it gets so bad, he even wants to eat the pig's food, and he doesn't even get that. And then finally, he comes to his senses, and he says, even at home, the hired servants have more than enough food. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to apologize to my father. I'm going to say, Father, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. Could you just take me on as a hired servant? And he's coming up a little bit with, it sounds like an apology, but there's a little bit of a contract applied. He's trying to work his way back. So he returns home to his father, and while he was still a long ways off, it's like his father was seeing him coming. He's waiting for him. And he sees him, and he runs out to his father. For a patriarch to run to his father would be embarrassing. To run to his son, sorry. A patriarch to run to his son. A dad to run to his son at that time would have been embarrassing. The listeners are embarrassed for this father. So he runs out, he says, and he basically starts to hug him and to kiss him, welcome him back. And the son kind of starts with his apology. And he goes into, I've sinned against heaven, I've sinned against you. I'm not worthy to be your son. Can I just work as a hired hand? And his father stops him. And he says, okay, he doesn't actually remember that he's a son. And he calls his servants, and they come and they bring a robe and they put it on him. And he's like, hey, bring that ring that has our family name on it. Put that on his finger so he remembers he's my son. And the father just thwarts the contract that was the younger son is trying to put in place. And meanwhile, the older son was out in the field, and he's working, and he kind of comes home, and they've killed the fattened calf, and he hears music and dancing, and he's asked the servant, he's like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, your brother is alive. He was lost, he's found. Come on in, we're having a party. And instead of coming inside, the older brother was angry, and he wouldn't go in. And his father came out, and he begged him, and he said, and he's begging him to come in, and the son just replies, he says, you know what? All these years, I've slaved for you. I've done everything you've ever told me to do, and not once have you ever even given me a goat for me and my friends. It's like he's got his own group of friends going on. Yet, when this son of yours, he doesn't actually call him his brother, when this son of yours comes back after squandering money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. I think the key phrase that clues us in a little bit what's going on. He uses this, the older son says, I've slaved for you. So what's going on there? And this is entitlement, the second type of entitlement, and it is making demands because of a process. The first one is making demands without process. The second one is making demands because of a process. It's because I work so hard, I deserve it. It's because I did the right things, I should get this. And that's a different type of entitlement. And basically, the result of that is that this son feels like his son life, he is slaving away. His life feels like a duty, and it lacks beauty. So his father says to him, and he's trying to kind of bring him out of this delusion. And he's saying, hey, you're my son. We've always been together, like we're on the same side here, and everything I've ever had is yours. What are you working so hard for? So this father attempts to reason his son out of his adolescent behavior, out of this delusion. But the story ends there. And it ends with a son who has isolated himself and separated himself from his father, from his brother, and from his home. Entitled thinking brings a type of delusion which leads to seclusion. Entitlement brings delusion, which leads to seclusion. The story isn't actually just about one son. It's called the prodigal son, but it's actually about two sons. And Jesus wants the listener, that's you, not the person beside you. He wants the listener to compare and to contrast these two sons so that we can see ourselves in the story. And I think, if you're honest, you can kind of see that the younger and the older son, they're suffering from the same delusion, this behavior. And if we are honest, we can see that we suffer from the same delusion in that we think we are deserving of things from the Father based on our behavior. And some of us are trying to have the things of the Father by behaving very, very good or by behaving very, very bad. And both we're missing the point. We are acting like an adolescent. Some of you, some of us, some of me included here, have put expectations on God, and we're holding him hostage to those expectations by being very good or by being very bad. And that is adolescent behavior. You're holding God hostage. You're offended about something that happened in your life because you did your part and he didn't. You did your part. You did your part, but your brother died, or your cousin died, or you lost your job. You did everything right, but your wife still left you, or somebody hurt you, or cheated on you, but you did everything right, and now your family has turned on you, or your mom has left you behind, or you can't get ahead financially, or maybe you have this idea of this perfect home, of what your house should look like, what your home should look like, with like a little boy and a little girl, and a husband who's home 5 hours every night, date nights every Wednesday, and that isn't happening. And you're holding God hostage because it's not being played out the way you think it should be. Here's the thing. We think we're so right, but adolescents think they're so right. The truth is you haven't done everything right. The truth is you can't do anything right apart from the Father, because it is God who gives good gifts. He enables every good thing. The problem is you're holding God hostage for things you think he should do, and now you're his God instead of the other way around, because you have to sit there and tell him what he should and what he shouldn't do. It's like we don't trust his heart, that we have to sit there and tell him, no, you can't do this, but you have to do this. It has to look like this. And that just reveals that we don't really have a good perception of who our Father really is, what's in his true heart. And as a result, this adolescent behavior, this delusion has led you into a place of seclusion. And who will lead us home? Who's going to lead us out of our adolescence? You know, there was one person in the story for the listener who knew they knew just in the story as they listened to it, it was somebody's job to go and get the younger son and bring him home. The listeners at the time knew that it was somebody's job in that story, and the truth is it was the older brother's responsibility to go and get his brother and bring him home. The older brother doesn't do that in the story, and the story ends there. And we're left with an older brother who didn't do what he was called to do. Jesus, I think, in his wisdom, ends it without a good older brother because he wants the listener, he wants you and me to desire, to want someone who can lead us out of our own delusion. And Jesus wants to lead us out of our adolescent behavior. He is our true older brother, mature. And here's some things that you might see in the story that Jesus wants to lead us out of. Jesus wants to lead us out of contracts. He wants to lead us out of contract thinking. And a contract thinking is just basically, like, I did my part and you're not doing yours. It sounds like a teenager. We put contracts in place often just to control or to protect ourselves. We put contracts in place or insurance in place for earthquakes or to protect us from a bad business deal. But a commitment is a promise to walk with us through hard things. God wants commitments over contracts. Adults ask, what promises do I need to keep? Consumerism. Jesus wants to lead us out of this type of thinking where we think we need these things the way we think, and boy, do we need them now. And he wants to lead us out of that. The younger son in the story, he's exemplifying that, demanding the stuff. Younger sons want things now. Adults ask, what's going to pay off later? There's lots of ways this could play out, but here's one idea since we're all here this morning. Maybe you've been coming to PAC for a while, and we just say, keep coming and come enjoy it. But at some point, we really want you to dive into deeper community, which we call house churches. Because it's great to come in on a Sunday morning and to get some great coffee, to listen to some great music and have some good teaching about God and life. But at some point, we don't want you to just get things because it's what you can give that will change you and it'll change the community around you. It'll change our church. It'll change our city. Jesus wants to lead us out of sensuality. And both sons did what they just felt was right. It was kind of in my magic show where you have these kids you just feel entitled and they just do whatever they feel like. And Jesus wants to lead us past that. Jesus wants to lead us out of hoarding our time and our resources. And the older son in this story is protecting his share of the estate. When the younger son comes back, that means he's going to lose some of what he's worked so hard for. And there's many of us here today with our stuff, and we think we've worked for everything and we deserve it because we worked so hard. And here's the truth. Every good thing you have in your life is because God enabled it. He put it there. Because every good gift comes from him. Jesus wants to lead us out of superior thinking, this idea that we're better than other people, this myth that you're so right. And both the sons just think they're so right in this story. Some of us think our views of God, we're just so right. And we kind of form our own little groups or politics or people. We just think we're so right. But the truth is we were all wrong at some point. We were all wrong with our own thinking, but we were also wrong in life, and we need to extend the same grace that Christ offered us to other people. The last thing Jesus wants to lead out of is idolatry. This is just really wanting the Father's things, but not the Father. It's wanting his stuff. And when we stay too long in any of these areas, we end up, in these adolescent areas, we end up just in toil and feeling frustrated. Like the older son in the story is just so angry, and everything you do feels like you're slaving And Jesus wants to lead us out of this as a good son, as an older son. But what is he leading us to? Jesus' life leads us to really one thing. Everything he really did was to this one thing. And he came to reveal the heart of God. He came to bring the full revelation of the heart of the Father. Jesus, when he comes on the scene, is bringing us into a new understanding, a new way of thinking about God. And it's brand new. There were lots of old ways to think of him, but Jesus is presenting a new way that the Father is really good. And you've all had misconceptions along the way, or you think you're right, but this is who he really is. Through his life, Jesus enacts this. Because if your Father is really good and you're a son, you don't have to make demands to a good dad. You don't have to posture for position in the family. When we see his heart is good, we gladly want to serve him. We gladly want to share our things with other people. And if our Father is truly good, our toil gets transformed into soil for our future. And this duty, this slaving, gets transformed into beauty. Only Jesus can reveal the Father's true heart, and his life was dedicated to that. Every story you pull out of the Bible, you'll see the true heart of God. Jesus steps into a woman who's about to be stoned because she's committed adultery, and Jesus risks his life and his reputation because it's what any good dad in this room would do if your daughter was about to be stoned. Any dad would risk everything to rescue a daughter. Anything. Everything Jesus did, healing people, reveals the heart of God. And the big exclamation point is him offering his life. He says, I'll take the punishment so that the sins, the things that we've done wrong, don't carry us into eternity. And Jesus cuts that off and he says, no, I'll take that so my sons and daughters can be free. This is the true heart of God. And there's this song that we're about to sing, and it's called A Good, Good Father. And it starts off with this great line. It says, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like. And I really think Jesus felt like this. When he came on the scene, I think he was thinking, man, people got you so wrong. People got you so wrong. And he lived his life in a brand new way. And you can't bring the old way into the new way. This is the new way to think about God, in that he is perfect and that he is truly good. And Jesus wants to lead us out of our delusion. Maybe you have an offended part of your life where you think life should have played out this way and it didn't play out that way. And you're just offended at God. It didn't go the way you thought. While we sing this song, give you a chance. At some point, you can just close your eyes, bring that thing back into your mind, that memory which has hurt you, and ask your really good older brother to come and show himself there, and you will see the true heart of who God really is. Feel free to do that. We're going to sing, and then I'll come back up and pray. He's better than you think. When we see his true love and good character, all these adolescence behaviors, when we see his true love, his good character, it gets us past that, our own thinking. And our duty gets turned to beauty, and it becomes the fuel of our lives. It's not obligation. You see, he wants to change the way we think. He wants to grow us up past adolescence. And here's really the last part of this. At some point, when we ask him to come in and help us to lead us out of our delusion, help us to get past some of these adolescent ways, when we ask Jesus to come and to help us to lead us out of that, at some point, you're actually going to get the heart of God in that matter, and you are going to become this reflex of the heart of God. And we will move away from just asking questions like, what would Jesus do? And we will simply just reflect him. And the way that you think, it'll be just like his. And you'll simply do what he would do. He's growing us up. Maybe there's something today you need prayer for. I'll just call the prayer team forward here today, and maybe you just want to talk about something today. Maybe there's a contract you're hanging on to or some type of this thinking. So prayer team will be at the front. Come on up and just have a conversation if you want. We really want you to get into community. We want you to get out of your delusion, which has led you to seclusion, and you can't do that on your own. You're going to need some help. We want that for you. The last thing, if some of this true character of God stuff is really hitting home for you, this week we're having a Father's Embrace, and it's really the whole point of this teaching is really just to reveal this over and over again, make it fundamentally clear so we can grow up. And I encourage you to find out more information at the info booth and maybe sign up for that. It would be really good. Have a great morning.